I'm hoping people had a chance to watch our intro video for the background information, so I can just jump right into the Battlestar Galactica miniseries from 2003. We start out with the Cylons destroying Armistice Station after having not been seen for over 40 years. At the same time, the Battlestar Galactica is in the process of becoming a museum. At over 50 years old, and the last of her kind, she's going to be repurposed. The decommissioning ceremony is attended by the Galactica's commander, William Adama, his son Lee, the Secretary of Education, Laura Roslin, and many other people. The Cylons attacked the colonies, which was made possible by the access Gaius Baltar had given to his girlfriend while working on a navigation system. His girlfriend turned out to be a Cylon and had been using her access to disable the colonial defenses, which proved to be a near-extinction level event for humanity. The Galactica and other ships that were built to be impervious to Cylon control found themselves back in service. Commander Adama and his crew scrambled to get old fighters up and running and head to an old munitions depot to load up their museum with ammunition. Secretary of Education Laura Roslin is heading back to Caprica when the president and every other person in front of her in the line of succession is killed by the Cylons. She is sworn in as the new president with Lee Adama, William Adama's son, in attendance. Lee's father orders them to meet the Galactica at the munitions depot. President Roslin chooses to stay put and help gather up the survivors. When the Cylons attack the president's ship, William Adama believes his son Lee has been killed, but Lee's quick thinking has saved the president's ship. Gaius Baltar is one lucky SOB. Boomer and Hilo are repairing their damaged Raptor on Caprica. When they are approached by a group of refugees, they recognize the genius, Gaius Baltar, and Hilo gives up his seat for Baltar, who ends up on the president's ship and is made her Cylon tech advisor. The president gathers surviving ships, but not all have FTL, which means they can't jump from the location where they are to another one. They have to just kind of put along to get there. When the Cylons attack the group of surviving ships, those with FTL jump away, and those left behind are destroyed. The president and remaining refugees jump to the munitions depot to rendezvous with the Galactica. William Adama is trapped with what seems like a very unbalanced person who is very ill. It's revealed that this man is actually a Cylon. Adama is forced to kill this Cylon when it attacks him, but he has learned that the Cylons now look human, and their consciousness gets downloaded into a brand new body when they die. Now on Galactica, Gaius Baltar is having visions of his lover, who was a Model 6 Cylon. She points out Cylon tech on the bridge, and Baltar has to think of a way to point it out without implicating himself. Baltar decides to accuse a member of the crew that had been filming the decommissioning ceremony. Once Adama is back on board, he tells Baltar, the newly designated expert on Cylon technology, that Cylons now look human. Baltar creates a Cylon detector and uses his findings to set up the camera guy, who is then left at the munitions depot for the Cylons to find. Ironically, when the Cylons arrive, it turns out this guy really was a Cylon. We also learn that Boomer is a Cylon sleeper agent. Commander Adama is happy to learn that his son Lee is alive. President Roslin asks the older Adama if he is planning on instituting martial law. He tells her he's planning on repairing Galactica and getting back to the fight. President Roslin tells Commander Adama that the war is over and they lost. There are 50,000 people left, and if they want their species to survive, they have to find a new home and start having babies. Adama resists at first, but then realizes that President Roslin is right. He decides to take the Galactica and the remaining civilians and do as the president said. They're going to run from the Cylons, look for a new home, and start having babies. The Cylons are waiting for the humans to emerge from the storm surrounding the munitions depot. The Galactica and her fighters hold off the Cylons while the civilian ships jump away. Once clear of the Cylons, Commander Adama tries to boost morale by telling everyone he knows the location of Earth, the planet of legend where the 13th tribe of Kobol settled. Morale is indeed boosted. President Roslin knows it was a lie and promises to keep Adama's secret because it is far more important that the people have something to live for than for them to know the truth. And that is pretty much how the entire rebooted Battlestar Galactica series kicks off.
This miniseries, to me anyway, changed the way science fiction television was made. You either see that as for the better or for the worse, but it is what it is. And that realistic documentary type look to it, I think, was changed ever since the rebooted Galactica series aired. And there are certain techniques that I think are still used today. I don't know if they invented the snap zoom, but in Galactica, that's when I see a snap zoom, that's when the camera zooms in really fast and then stops on something that's far away. That technique was used a lot in this television series. Not so much in the miniseries, but a lot in the television series. So I think that whenever I see a snap zoom, I think of this series, even if it predates this, because I honestly don't know if that technique predates this. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at this is a post 9/11 story. And even though there were ideas in the works before 9/11 happened, this series, as the TV series took off, it definitely took on the post 9/11 mindset. And to me, there's both negatives and positives to that. The deconstruction piece that we are now plagued with on every single television show that we watch, I would argue if it didn't start at this TV series, it happened at the same time. The characters in this miniseries, who many of which I really like these characters in this miniseries, as the series went on, I would argue they destroyed almost every character in this series. What they did to Apollo was tragic. What they did to Starbuck was sad. That character had so much potential. I just had trouble as the TV series went on. I had trouble keeping focus, not thinking that this was being made up as it was going along. It reminded me a lot of J.J. Abrams' Lost. Not so much the exact story ideas, because they were very different, but the idea of the mystery box. At least this series answered more mystery boxes than J.J. Lost did. It was that same type of storytelling technique where they were making promises for bigger and bigger stuff. One of the ongoing jokes, if you follow this Battlestar Galactica series, is as the TV series began, the introductory piece that started each episode would always have this line about the Cylons and they have a plan. And it was promising that there really was this well thought out plan that the Cylons had. They did not. In fact, there is a behind the scenes where Ronald D. Moore talks about this because he didn't want that catch line in the introduction. And he talks about how they had to scramble to try to come up with some sort of cohesive answer to maybe that question. But how do you stick a question at the beginning of every single episode and not have that thought out? So for me, the positives here that I think in the miniseries that somebody should use to watch this is like the beginning of modern science fiction storytelling and cinematography. Good or bad, this is where I think it began. And I think there's a good story here. I think the concept of a huge crisis that wipes out the entire civilization and then having to scramble to try to make do with what you have left, I think is an important post-apocalyptic type story. I did like the fact that as the TV series went on in the first season, the president had this whiteboard on her ship with the number of people left in their fleet. And every time people died, she'd cross off the number and put the new number on there. So human life meant something to the show, at least at the beginning. And I think that that was an important message too. The munitions dump, I think that was Ragnar Anchorage, if I'm remembering the name. If you go on YouTube and watch the Battle of Ragnar Anchorage, that's a really cool battle scene. Because as we talked about in our tech video, what Galactica did is when they were inside the munitions cloud, where the munitions depot was, it was surrounded by this cloud. They couldn't really jump from that, but they had to give time for the civilian ships to leave. So the visuals of the Galactica basically turning to face the Cylon base stars and then basically taking a pounding while it was buying time for the people to get away. The chaos that followed after that, with the fighting that was happening with the dogfights and the Galactica going toe-to-toe with those base stars, it was very chaotic. It reminded me a bit of like how Saving Private Ryan was with that landing scene and how that was all chaotic. This was very similar to that, not quite that intense, but it was still similar. That was a really well done scene. In fact, in the TV series, there are several battles that are really well done. It's hard to believe the CGI from this is from like 2003, 2004, if we're talking early in the run here, because this stuff holds up well now. If you catch something in maybe the right light in a space scene, it might look a little bit sketchy, but I mean, you've got to look for that. The space battle scenes in this series are really, really well done and hold up well today. This mini-series, I don't think I can think of a single space battle scene that I would say is iffy. When they were on the Armistice Station at the very beginning and you had the metal Cylons, that looked a bit sketchy. I won't say otherwise. They looked sketchy. But the outside space battle scenes, those were really well done. Probably some of the best space battle scenes you've seen ever, TVs or movies, that Battle of Anchorage. And I would recommend, if you don't watch the series, just Google that, Battlestar Galactica, Ragnar, Anchorage, and just watch the scene for what it is, because it's really, really well done. And the series itself did cover some things. I mean, Molly mentioned in the miniseries when Rosalind was trying to assert that she was the civilian president, even after this crisis. And she asked Adama, like, are you planning on practicing some sort of martial law with you in charge? And his response to that was, of course not. So he still believed in a civilian government, just not at this particular moment, because he still thought he was in war. And Rosalind had to convince him that the war's done. But throughout the series, they actually do touch quite a bit on civilian government versus military rule. This, again, was filmed post 9/11. Those type of things with the Patriot Act and all the stuff that followed after that, it's relevant. I think that's why this is science fiction, because it takes those ideas and puts them in their universe. I think it's worth watching the TV series just for those pieces. Unfortunately for me, the downfall of this series is there is too much melodrama in this series. Too many mystery boxes. All the things we complain about on series that go nowhere, you know, yelling in hallways and all this weird relationship talk that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of a story. The TV series, after this miniseries, is plagued with that. And it's difficult for us to rewatch the entirety of the 4-run seasons because it's infested with that. If you like that type of stuff, if you like that melodrama, you might really, really, really like the TV series. But in this video, all we're recommending is the 2-part mini-series that started the whole thing. There's a little bit of melodrama in there, but it's so minor. The main story, the post-apocalyptic dealing with the end of civilization, that carries the entire miniseries forward. And they don't really have time to have too many breaks from that. So the miniseries, highly, highly recommend. In fact, if you're a science fiction fan and you haven't seen this miniseries, I think you owe yourself to at least watch the miniseries. The TV series after this, I'm not going to push hard to say people need to watch it because there's some good stuff in there. There's a lot of bad in there too, in my opinion.
It's definitely worth seeing the miniseries at least once for all the reasons that you mentioned. But unfortunately, the series itself, because of all the melodrama and what I felt was character assassination that they did and all of the unfulfilled mystery boxes, the series I can't recommend to people unless you are into melodrama and mystery boxes, which some people are. And, you know, if that's your thing, I really think you would enjoy this show. If you're not into that, if you're more hard or mundane science fiction oriented, then, as I said, the 2-part miniseries is awesome. The series, for that kind of thing, not so much.
From an experience, I think it's worth seeing for a few things. I mentioned the Ragnar Anchorage battle. That was really well done. The scene that they had where a squadron of Vipers for the first time were approaching the Cylons and they were being shut down. The Vipers were being shut down. Their systems were being shut down by the Cylons. That was a really spooky scene to watch. I can't convey to you. It's one of those things that you have to watch it and experience it to see it. But that was a really spooky scene, and it was really worthwhile to watch that. I wish the TV series would have followed through with the promise that the miniseries was making. There is a concept in the TV series about how cyclical things are, specifically about creating artificial life and then that artificial life rebelling against you. That's a cyclical thing that goes on here. But in my opinion, they create this mythos of that because this is a spoiler coming up here. So keep in mind what I'm mentioning here is a spoiler. But Cobol, if you watched our ramping up video before this video, Cobol, the 13th tribe, was actually the artificial life forms that they created on Cobol that rebelled against what the life forms were doing, and they're the ones that went to Earth. And then they started introducing the concept of, was it the original 5, which were the original 5, we'll call them Cylons, that were the artificial life from Cobol. And then you had all these humanoid duplicates going on that were of the current era of Cylons. And to me, it just got all muddled, and they were trying to create this deep mythos. And I know there's a lot of people online that really get into this. And I can imagine if they hear this video, they're going to be all caps in the comments giving us the what for. But the TV series, I thought, got crushed under the mythos it was trying to create. There was some good in there, but a lot of dead ends and just, why did you do this? But the miniseries, there was so much promise. If you watch the miniseries, you can see where they could have gone with a lot of these concepts. It could have been really cool. They followed through with some of them, but a lot of them just kind of spiraled off into a, whatever.
Once we ended up with Colonel Ty's wife showing up, and it turns out she's a Cylon, that's pretty much where I drew the line.
Well, Ty himself was a Cylon.
That came after that, but, yeah. So, again, I think, and this is where I have a problem with a lot of TV series at this point, I prefer traditional storytelling where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. They had a great beginning, and then they had middle. Holy crap, we need an end. And they had gotten so convoluted at that point that the end was just, it wasn't much better than, oh, story's over.
They painted themselves in the corner with the Starbuck, the Kara Thrace character, that they had to introduce the concept of an angel. And I'm not exaggerating. It's open-ended on whether she ended up coming back as an angel, but there is an interpretation that she came back as an angel to help guide the colonial fleet to Earth. And you could just tell they were making this up. They ran out of ideas somewhere mid-first season. They ran out of ideas, and they were tacking stuff on as they were going along.
I'm surprised she didn't come back wearing a big jersey that said 42 on it, and they just admitted that the end of this was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
There was a lot of similarity to the finale.
The end.
Yep.
Yeah, so, again, I recommend the beginning, that miniseries, because you see a lot of the techniques that we still use now in science fiction television. However, the story beyond that, it meanders so much that it's unfortunate, because I think they really had something to begin with, but they just couldn't stick the landing.
In addition to the visual effects, the music of this miniseries is really well done. Specifically, the drums that they get going when the battle scenes happen, that's really well done. Again, I hate not being able to recommend the rest of the series because there's so much craft. I wish they put this amount of work into stuff now. So it pains me actually to say that I cannot recommend the TV series, just the miniseries. But what I try to do is invest my energy into saying this miniseries is pretty good. I really do think it's worth watching. Just look at it as a 3-hour movie and then it's done. If you want to go into the TV series after that, go ahead. All I can say is I was disappointed and Molly was disappointed with the TV series. You would probably be better off just watching the 3-hour miniseries. But that's completely your choice on what you want to do.
Agreed. Well, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of comments about this. Understand that this is just our opinion, and we recognize that we like different things. We're sorry if we stepped on anybody's toes or upset anyone by criticizing the series itself. I'm not saying that you don't have a right to enjoy it. I'm glad that you do. However, for us, it just wasn't our cup of tea, but that would just mean that we look for different things in our entertainment. We really enjoyed the miniseries. We would love to hear your thoughts on that and what you think that means as far as the impact that it had on science fiction television going forward after that, and even what kind of influence it still has today. So if anybody else has an opinion on that, we would love to hear from you.
Take care.